What made you realize your best friend was actually a complete bad person? Story 1. I was poor and in college. I had the flu really bad one week and asked my friend, he lived in a dorm across the hall, to go to the convenience store in the dorm lobby and get me something to drink, and he could get whatever for himself too. He got me my soda and himself $40 worth of snacks. Didn't notice at the time and I ordered us a pizza. He knew it was all I was going to have to eat for the next few days, and he snuck into my room and ate the leftovers while I was passed out on cold medicine. I didn't even really know how to respond. Like I was already buying him snacks and feeding him. He had a meal plan on campus. I didn't. Why act like that? Story 2. I was going through a really ugly breakup that left me in a very low point in my life. I was getting a lot of advice from my best friend on the whole situation. I told him that it would take time for me to get over her, as it was a relationship of over 2 years. 3 days after the breakup, I check Snap Maps and see that he is at my ex's apartment. It was 2 in the morning. He initially lied about it but then admitted to hooking up with her. I started crying over the phone and he literally said, "I just want you to know that I'm sorry this is hurting you, but I'm going to continue doing this with her." I lost my best friend of 22 years over that. It's crazy to me that one day, a friend who was a brother to me just snapped and ignored me in a really dark state of mind just so he could get laid. Story 3. Best friends since elementary. In high school, when I told her I no longer wanted to be friends because she was mean to others all the time, including me, she said that I had to be friends with her cause she was my friend in elementary and middle school even though everyone told her not to be, and that everyone talked behind my back about how gross and weird I was, and she stayed my friend anyhow. She worded it like she was doing me a huge favor by being my friend and that I somehow owed her for that charit. Story 4. Looking back on it, a red flag was when they insulted my mother's cooking. My family isn't very wealthy, but my mother does her best, and she had worked hard to make that meal so they wouldn't be hungry. And then they just insulted it. Also, they never said thank you. Unless it's got worms in it, you just don't say anything bad about a meal someone took the time and care to prepare for you as a guest. And it wasn't even a simple. I didn't like it very much. They straight up made fun of my mom and called her a terrible cook, which, by the way, she isn't. Story 5. Friends I used to hang out with in high school. One of the group had been a good friend of mine since we were really young, even though we went to different schools. It was his house the others always hung out in, so I was kind of grandfathered into his new friends group from his school. I always felt a little unwelcome just cause of little things. They'd be playing video games, passing the controller, and I was always last, if I got a turn at all. If someone brought food or something to share, I would always get the least of it, FYI. I brought things to share more than anyone, so it wasn't like I was a big mooch or something. And they frequently made plans outside of my buddy's house to which I was never invited. But then they'd openly talk about it in front of me later. Story 6. What really hit it home was one time I was hanging out there, and found out they were all planning on going into the city for a concert or something. They straight up told me I wasn't invited, which I shrugged off cause I didn't really have money for it anyway. But then their ride fell through and I offered to drive them. They treated that like it was absolute worst case scenario, and also like if they were to accept my offer they'd be somehow doing me a favor. I said okay, forget it. Message received. I left and never talked to them again. None of them ever tried to contact me again either. But it was really only childhood friend whom I was really disappointed in. I thought for sure he'd at least check in after that obviously devastating interaction. But that was many years ago. Thankfully I have much better friends now. Story 7. Over time we lost contact, then she only reached out when she needed money. I let this go on too long until I found out I was pregnant with my first, and told her then I wouldn't send any money after that. She still asked. My daughter is now over 1.5 years old, and she had never even met her. I ended up blocking her and telling her not to bother trying to reach out anymore. Story 8. My brother turned his back on our dad, who paid his way through college, paid the down payment on his condo, and gave him 2 cars. When I asked him why, he said it was because he didn't text him enough. Our dad had had a stroke and could only use one hand. He texted my brother once every day or two with one hand anyway. I took care of our dad through surgery, radiation therapy, physical therapy, stroke rehab, and chemo. On the last weekend before our dad was starting chemo, I asked him if he wanted to come up and do some grilling with Dad because it was the last time we'd ever see him healthy. He said he had plans. I asked what the plans were. He wouldn't give me a straight answer. Our dad got so sick after that. Couldn't leave a wheelchair. My brother and sister came at Christmas, and my dad made such an effort to spend time with my brother that he broke both hips. My brother said to me later he honestly thought it would be best if our crazy mother shot our dad and herself. I think my brother is a lunatic. There's no anger or hate, I just can't think of him as a sane person anymore. Story 9. Probably when my GF at the time admitted to sleeping with him and my 3 other guy friends while we were together. Not in an embarrassed way either, she was throwing it in my face to hurt me. I hoped against my own instincts that it wasn't true, but I asked him and knew instantly from the look in his eyes that it was. Basically lost my whole friend group overnight, but ended up finding much better friends in the long run. It all works out. Story 10. If my guy best friend was interested in a girl or was talking to one, he would treat me like absolute garbage. When he had no girls to talk to or was interested in, he would be super nice to me and hang out all the time. A few years after we graduated high school, we were with a group of friends when he basically said, "I'm only nice to girls if there's a chance I can have S with them or there's no other girls in the picture." It all clicked. Story 11. There was this girl I was dating. I really liked her. At one point I introduced her to a really good friend of mine. Let's say his name was Bill Moran, because that's what it was. Fast forward a few days. I'm out on a date with that girl. She asked me what I thought about Bill. I told her he was a good friend of mine. She told me he was bad news, that he's asked her out. Mind you, it's not like we were in high school or anything, we were adults. She told him she wasn't interested, that he obviously had honesty/loyalty issues and wasn't a fit person to associate with at all, in any way, for anybody. He knew I liked her a lot. He did it anyway. F that guy. I haven't spoken to him since. It didn't work out between she and I, but that's okay. Story 12. When she moved in with her boyfriend who didn't like dogs. At first her 2 collies were locked in the basement. Rarely taken for walks. Instead they would just spread newspaper on the floor and switch it out when it was saturated. When the older of the 2 collies died, the remaining dog was banished to a small corner of the backyard chained to a doghouse. She didn't even go outside to feed her, but threw her food out of a window onto the ground. Only went out every other day or so to refill the water dish and pick up poop. She argued with me that all of the dog's needs were taken care of and she was fine. I draw the line at animal abuse. No one who I call a friend treats an animal like that. That's when I stopped being her friend. Haven't had any contact since. Story 13. This will get buried, but it's my time to shine. Best friend of 30 years. Gets a girl pregnant at 21. They get married. Have the baby. He gets mad at someone at work and walks out, with a newborn at home. My stepdad hires him, even though he doesn't really have any skills, nor is there a position for him. Works there for a long time. Learns well. Does a great job. Gets promoted often and is paid well. COVID happens. Stepdad files for some PPP. In the course of the paperwork they found out my best friend, who had been treated like a son, better than me at times, had embezzled roughly $100,000 over 3 or so years. Not my best friend anymore. Story 14. She was negative about everything and wanted people in her life to suffer and fail, including me. Also would say horrible, cruel, judgmental things about everyone in her life and blame everything outside of herself for her unhappiness. What started as a "oh she's my bitch" a blunt sassy friend who's like Daria, ended as "oh my goodness wait. You are genuinely a miserable, extremely lost, mentally unwell person who gets joy watching others suffer." She works as a princess character at Disneyland, by the way. Despises when the children ask for a hug or want to touch her. Hates children. But loves the makeup and wigs and having her picture taken. Cosplay type stuff.